Kia ora koutou katoa. This week, the first week of Lent, my reflections are on the theme of temptation. The first reflection is based on the well-known passage in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 4, 1-11. Let's start with the devil character, also known in this passage as Satan and the tempter. In the book of Job, the Hebrew word Satan literally means adversary. And there, like here in this text, the adversary has a job to do, namely to give voice to doubts, to destructive desires, to the debilitating shadows we all experience to some degree. And in this text, the adversary, the devil, works within the divine purpose and plan of Jesus' life and mission, not outside the plan or contrary to it. It's not difficult, though, to find across the Bible and other literature versions of the Satan as a sort of anti-God, source and embodiment of cosmic evil. Maybe hinted at in apocalyptic literature, but more the product of medieval and other cosmology and fantasy, not least from some fundamentalisms. Similarly, it's not difficult to find across Christian history the misuse of Satan as an instrument to apportion blame, to scapegoat, to stoke fear, and excuse all manner of violence. Like the witch trials in Europe, where an estimated 40,000 to 60,000 people, mostly women, died, killed. Like the anti-Semitic pogroms, fueled by a trope that cast Jews as the children of the devil. Like the hatred and violence towards gay, lesbian and other queer people, where their sexuality is labelled a distortion caused by the devil. We must never forget that bad theology, particularly the demonization of minorities, can be murderous. Personally, I do not believe in a literal devil or Satan. Such a character is at best a literary device to talk about wrestling with our conscience, including our doubts, desires, and fears, or a community doing similarly. And this passage today from Matthew, I would suggest, is about the Matthewan community, the community that gave rise to the gospel, wrestling about its purpose and mission, voicing its doubts, desires, and fears, and finally repudiating the love of power in favour of the power of love. One further comment before the triadic temptations. In verse 3, the tempter says, "If you are the Son of God," and then repeats the same phrase in verse 6. Son of God is not exclusively used for Jesus. Rather, it's a title, an honorific, that is used in the Bible to refer to King David and Israel as a whole. Notably, the Roman emperor also uses this title. The Matthew scholar Daniel Harrington points out that the issue here is not so much whether Jesus is the Son of God, but what kind of Son of God Jesus will turn out to be. A Son of God like Caesar or David, or an altogether different Son of God. The three temptations. Well, there's some comedy in this script. Jesus and Mr. Tempter trying to out-Bible verse each other. Scripture says one. Scripture also says the other. Kind of like a game of ping pong. A proof text duel. The duel underlines the fact that singular Bible verses, proof texts, are not authoritative by themselves, nor indeed are whole books, or, close your Presbyterian ears, the Bible as a whole. In terms of authority, the Bible works in conjunction with the interpretive community, the Church, who draw on tradition, reason, and experience. We, the Church, give the Bible authority, not God. The first temptation is the provision of bread, with its resonances to the book of Exodus. This temptation is about aspiring to be a great leader like the mighty Moses, providing the hungry with manna and providing Israel with a new law. The irony here is this is precisely how the rest of the Gospel of Matthew portrays Jesus, feeding the multitudes, giving a new law, the Sermon on the Mount, and leading people into freedom. And maybe Jesus' repudiation of this temptation is a message about not seeking to follow in the paths of any great leaders from the past, and thus being constrained by the expectations of such, but walking his own path in his own way, doing his own thing, commanding not a great exodus towards liberation, but a ragtag bunch of losers who believed love was more powerful than the sword. In short, we need to be careful about wearing the aspirations of others and from our own past. The second temptation is about dangerous acts and seeking angelic help. Skydiving off the temple parapet without a parachute. Dangerous adrenaline acts that seem to be for highlighting the bravery of the risk-taker and the saving power of the Almighty's minions. Dangerous acts are like circus stunts for onlookers to applaud. Acts that draw attention, acts that have little to do with the prophet Micah's words, "What does God require of you but to act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly?" Of course, bearing in mind what I said earlier about proof texting, it's possible to find biblical examples of warrior leaders, sons of God, engaging in dangerous acts, thinking they are just, ignoring mercy, and lacking in humility, and believing with or without angels they have been blessed by God. But Jesus, or rather the Jesus of the Matthewan community, was not following the path of popularity and demonstrative power. He was following an altogether different path. In short, we need to be careful how we use what power and influence we have, and for what purpose. The last and climatic temptation is the Caesar moment. Here the tempter is offering dominion, rule over all the kingdoms and queendoms of the world, just like Caesar has. For surely this is true power, and the true purpose of any Messiah, Son of God, restoring the glory of Israel, and all that, and all that, and all that. The only catch being that you must bow in obedience and service to that which is not God. You must worship, desire, and accumulate mighty power, and love it, rather than serve the weak power of love. There are plenty of leaders today, of churches or in politics, who still quote Scripture, offer material rewards as payoffs, and suggest God's promises mean personal or even national glory. Such proposals to misuse power give off only the faintest of odours, but threaten to cause all to rot. Evil is more likely to be banal, perhaps closer to common sense than we might think. This first reading in the end has a simple message. Jesus is the one who subordinates the desire of power for the power of love. And so should we. The second reading today is taken from the draft of my new book, and I've titled it Today's Temptations, though I'm sure there's many more than what I list. It's written in the style of couplets, with antithetical or synonymous parallelism. The first two, and I'll read them. There is a temptation to do nothing, and the temptation to think we always have to do something. There is a temptation to think it all depends on me, and then temptation to think nothing depends on me. These two address the modern and Presbyterian ailment called busyness. Or put more positively, when and how do we show our concern? And is action always necessary? Stillness. Being centered in stillness. What our forebears might have called prayer is a corrective to our cultural preoccupation with activity and our need to be useful. It's about that balance between being and doing. The third couplet. There is the temptation to equate success with blessing, and the temptation to equate failure with curse. This couplet addresses the ailment of success. In considering the successful blessed and the unsuccessful failures. In our society, we usually measure success in terms of money, status and acquisitions, which tips the scale in favour of those who already have, gaining more. Whereas following our first reading today, if love, giving it, feeling it, nurturing it, was our primary measure of success, maybe we would all be happier. The fourth and fifth couplets. There's a temptation to see sickness as somehow morally bad, and the temptation to see health as somehow morally good. There's the temptation to believe that money brings happiness, and the temptation to believe that going without can't. Similar to the success couplet, I'm again critiquing our cultural assumptions around the alleged moral virtues, this time of health and wealth, both of which are nice to have. But because one doesn't enjoy either or both, does not mean that one is lacking in either morality or happiness. The sixth couplet. There is a temptation to think that my suffering is all that matters, and the temptation to think that the suffering of others doesn't. This couplet about suffering is also about the temptation not to get caught by its hooks. Suffering, hospitalization, and the healing process tend to turn us inward, understandably, on ourselves, which, especially if the suffering is ongoing, can self-focus us, even snare us. That's when we need the courage, in spite of our ongoing pain or discomfort, to turn our thoughts outward. The seventh couplet. There is the temptation to take for granted the love we receive, and the temptation to think that love has to be earned. Love. The privilege of being loved and the continual cultivation of gratitude for the same are important virtues. The great heresy of our day, and every day past, is that love has to be earned. It doesn't. Love at its best is unconditional. And we at our best need to model such unconditionality. Christians call that modeling of unconditional love discipleship. And lastly, a couplet on prayer. There's the temptation to believe prayer is what we think and say, and the temptation to believe we know how to pray. This begins with a little deconstructing. Prayer is not just what we think and say. You've heard me before, if you listened to me before on the subject. Prayer is a whole of being thing, a stillness, an engagement, a channeling of love to and from us. But, here I move on to the second part of the couplet. With prayer, when we think we have arrived, we haven't. One of the greatest prayers is simply, Lord, teach me to pray. And when we seem to have an answer and are doing that answer, we will in time find ourselves again praying, Love, teach me how to pray. When we seem to have an answer and are doing the answer, we will in time find ourselves again saying, Life, teach me to pray. And so it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes, as our life goes. Blessings to you and those you love this week.